The last place she felt safe became the place she died. Inside her own home, a young newlywed was beaten and shot in a brutal attack. Police said it was a burglary, but nothing was taken. No forced entry, no panic outside the walls, only violence that felt deeply personal. The case went cold. Files were closed, leads quietly set aside. Buried in the evidence was something no one could explain at the time. A mark, left behind in rage, preserved and forgotten. For years, the person responsible lived a normal life, protected by trust, shielded by authority, until science caught up. This is the true story of Sherri Rasmussen, and the truth that waited decades to surface.
Before we continue, one quiet thing. It costs nothing to like and subscribe, but it helps these voices reach further. It tells the victims that someone is listening, that someone cares. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, your support can make that possible.
What looked like the beginning of a perfect marriage was already the end of something else. During his college years at UCLA, John dated a fellow student named Stephanie Lazarus. It was casual, a brief relationship John never considered serious, and one he believed ended quietly when they graduated. After college, John continued his education, enrolling in graduate studies to further his engineering career. In his mind, life moved forward, and the relationship was firmly in the past. By the mid-1980s, John was focused on his work and building a stable future. Around that same time, through mutual friends, he met Sherri Rasmussen. Sherri was striking, tall, graceful, with soft features and kind eyes. At just 29, she was already the director of nursing at a major Los Angeles hospital. Sherri's intelligence was undeniable, but what truly set her apart was her warmth. Her presence calmed the chaos of the ER. Colleagues admired her. Patients trusted her. John was captivated, not just by her beauty, but by her quiet strength and grace. Within a year of meeting, John and Sherri were engaged. In November 1985, they married, bought a condo in Van Nuys, and began what looked like a perfect life together, filled with promise, peace, and love. But a shadow lingered that would one day explode in a way no one could have imagined. She said, "If I can't have John, no one can." No one listened. In the early 1980s, Stephanie Lazarus was a UCLA student dating John Rutan. To her, he wasn't just a boyfriend, he was the one. For John, it was a casual college romance that quietly ended when they graduated in 1983. By 1985, Stephanie had joined the Los Angeles Police Department, beginning her career as a rising officer. She was trained, armed, and respected.
All right, team, let's move
but
out.
her obsession with John had not
Stay sharp
faded.
and watch each other's
When John
backs.
began dating Sherri Rasmussen and married her in November 1985, Stephanie's fixation grew. Between 1985 and 1986, she took deliberate actions to interfere in John and Sherri's life. She repeatedly appeared uninvited at their Van Nuys condo.
You need to leave
She knocked
now.
on their door, claiming there was
Please, we
unfinished
just wanna
business
talk.
with John. She sent messages and notes to John. She observed their routine and movements. Sherri became unsettled, then frightened. This was not ordinary jealousy. It was calculated and persistent. "If I can't have John, no one can." Those words, allegedly spoken by Stephanie to Sherri, were more than just bitterness. They were a warning. Sherri confided in her family, telling them about this officer who would not let go.
Can't believe
Yet
this
no
is
one could have
happening.
imagined how
We
far
need to
Stephanie's
do
obsession
something
would
now.
go. It looked like a robbery, but nothing was stolen, except her life. John Roten left their condo early that morning to go to work, leaving his wife, Sherri Rasmussen, at home. She had considered calling in sick, hoping for a quiet, slow day, but that morning would turn into a nightmare. Sometime during the hours John was away, an intruder entered the condo. Sherri was attacked with brutal force. She suffered multiple injuries. Her face was bruised, her body beaten, and she had been shot 3 times at close range. A deep bite mark was left on her arm, a violent signature, unusual and personal. By the afternoon, Sherri was discovered dead in her living room. The scene showed clear signs of a struggle. Police arrived and began their initial investigation. At first, they considered a burglary gone wrong, but key details didn't fit. There was no forced entry. Cash, jewelry, and electronics were untouched. The level of violence was far beyond what would be expected in a typical robbery. When John returned, he was met with devastation. The woman he loved, vibrant, compassionate, full of life, was gone. Friends and family were left in shock, struggling to comprehend the brutality of the crime. The question that hung over everyone's minds: who could hate Sherri enough to kill her in such a violent, personal way? The crime was brutal.
Make sure to log the
evidence
position of that marker.
Chilling.
Noted.
But the truth?
Checking for fibers
It
now.
slipped through
Looks
the
like
cracks.
a match. Photograph
Sherri
it.
Rasmussen sensed something wasn't right, and she told her parents. A woman from John's past, his ex-girlfriend Stephanie Lazarus, would not leave them alone. She showed up uninvited at their Van Nuys condo more than once. Her possessive behavior left Sherri deeply unsettled. Sherri later told friends about something that chilled her. Stephanie had allegedly said, "If I can't have John, no one can." Those words were not just bitterness, they were a warning. On February 24, 1986, after Sherri's brutal murder, the LAPD launched their investigation. From the very beginning, something felt wrong. Critical details were overlooked, brushed aside, or quietly ignored. Despite glaring signs at the scene, a violent struggle, a bite mark, and valuables left untouched, detectives rushed to a conclusion. They labeled it a burglary gone wrong. Their theory was simple. Sherri, tall and athletic, had interrupted burglars and paid the price, but her family and friends did not believe it. Sherri was 6 feet tall, confident, and physically strong. Her father, Nels Rasmussen, pleaded with investigators. He urged them to look into Stephanie Lazarus, John's ex-girlfriend, a woman who had harassed Sherri, a woman who worked for the LAPD herself. The police noted her name and then quietly dismissed it. Stephanie was one of their own. That alone made her untouchable. Leads fizzled out. Evidence was shelved. The bite mark was photographed, but no further action was taken. The case stalled, not because clues were missing, but because they were inconvenient. For 2 decades, Sherri's murder remained unsolved, buried under grief, silence, and willful blindness. But a shadow lingered, and one day it would explode in a way no one could have imagined. For 23 years, the killer wore a badge and walked free. In 1986, after Sherri Rasmussen's brutal murder, Los Angeles moved on, but her family didn't. Her father, Nels Rasmussen, refused to let the case fade. He wrote letters, made calls, pleaded with detectives to investigate John's ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Lazarus, the very woman Sherri feared. But the LAPD dismissed his concerns. Stephanie was one of their own, a respected officer, untouchable. Meanwhile, Stephanie continued her life, married, rising through the ranks, seemingly untouchable. No one suspected the woman behind the badge could commit such violence. For more than 2 decades, Sherri's murder gathered dust in cold case files, locked away from justice. A preserved bite mark sat in evidence, waiting quietly for science to catch up. And in 2009, it finally did. A bite mark from 1986 spoke the truth in 2009. In 2009, the LAPD's newly formed cold case unit began digging through forgotten murders buried in the archives. One detective pulled Sherri Rasmussen's file, and something about it didn't sit right. Among the evidence was a photograph of a bite mark on her arm, a silent wound, frozen in time. In cold storage, they discovered a preserved swab from that bite. For 23 years, it had waited quietly, patiently, for science to catch up. Back in 1986, DNA testing was still in its infancy, but in 2009, technology finally met justice. The swab was run through the National DNA Database, and the results were shocking. The killer was a woman, a female killer, rare, almost unheard of in such a brutal crime. To beat, shoot, and bite a victim? It defied expectation. Investigators revisited everyone close to Sherri. One name jumped off the page like a ghost from the past: Stephanie Lazarus, John's ex-girlfriend. The same woman Sherri had warned her parents about, the one who had appeared uninvited and never truly left. Stephanie was no longer a forgotten footnote. She was a suspect, a cop, one of their own. But taking down an officer would require absolute secrecy. Any hint of suspicion, and she could vanish into the shadows. She had no idea the hunters were closing in, not on the streets, but from inside her own department. In 2009, with Stephanie Lazarus identified as a suspect through DNA, the LAPD cold case unit faced a delicate challenge. She was still a respected detective, walking the same hallways, wearing the same badge. Any misstep could tip her off and jeopardize the case. So the team moved quietly, just as she would have. They tracked her daily routine, observed her movements, and waited for the perfect opportunity. That chance came in the most ordinary way. Stephanie tossed a cup into a public trash can. Inside it, a discarded straw that could finally unlock a 23-year-old mystery. Back at the lab, DNA from the straw was compared to the preserved bite mark swab from Sherri Rasmussen's murder. The result was undeniable. A perfect match. Stephanie Lazarus. The bite mark that had stayed silent for over 2 decades had finally spoken. No dramatic sting was needed. Stephanie was arrested quietly right inside LAPD headquarters, the very place where she had once been trusted to protect and serve. The bite mark, the DNA, the lies. After 23 years, it all came full circle. Justice had finally found its way home. A cop on trial, a courtroom gripped by betrayal. In February 2012, nearly 26 years after Sherri Rasmussen's murder, the Los Angeles courthouse became the stage for justice. Stephanie Lazarus, once a respected LAPD detective, stood trial for first-degree murder. The trial opened with two opposing stories. The defense portrayed Stephanie as a loyal officer wrongly accused by a flawed system. Across the room, Sherri's parents, John and Loretta Rasmussen, sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the woman who had taken their daughter. The prosecution built their case methodically. They presented the DNA match from the 1986 bite mark, irrefutably tied to Stephanie. They revealed her obsessive past, her uninvited visits to Sherri's condo, her lies to investigators in 1986. Piece by piece, the truth unfolded before the jury. Stephanie remained stoic, her face a mask, but the evidence was unrelenting, each fact a weight on the scales of justice. After just days of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Stephanie was sentenced to 27 years to life, a long fall from decorated detective to convicted killer. For John and Loretta Rasmussen, the verdict was more than a legal outcome. It was the justice they had waited a lifetime to see. What if that one piece of evidence had been lost? And what does it mean when those meant to protect are the ones hiding the truth? In 1986, Sherri Rasmussen was murdered inside her own home, not by a stranger in the dark, but by someone close enough to be overlooked. The warnings were there: unwanted visits, fear shared with family, a name quietly dismissed. The investigation didn't collapse because evidence was missing. It collapsed because the truth was uncomfortable. The case went cold. Files were closed, and for years Sherri's family waited, writing letters, asking questions, being ignored. One detail survived: a mark preserved in evidence, a truth science couldn't hear at the time. Without it, this case might still be buried. When DNA finally spoke, it didn't just identify a killer. It exposed a system that protected its own for far too long. Justice came. But late. The verdict closed the case. It didn't close the wound. And it leaves us with a question that doesn't fade so easily. If that mark had never been left behind, would the killer still be trusted today? How many crimes are still labeled unsolved? Not because the answers are gone, but because they were never truly pursued. How many killers wear uniforms? How many secrets are hiding behind respectability?